the regular milk.
No.
Okay. Bradley, you want to go ahead and start asking a question?
I don't have any question to ask.
You're being recorded now.
That's right.
Was it for Hebrew school or what? For regular school?
Nothing.
Huh?
It's for nothing.
What do you mean for nothing?
It's not for
Isn't
school.
this a project what you're supposed to do?
No.
Then why you gonna record it?
Why?
I can talk to you anytime you want me to talk to you without the
So we don't
recording.
forget.
That we don't forget what? See, there is the question.
Like the Holocaust.
You want to know something about the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You know
I want to know what happened.
what happened?
Yeah.
What happened? They took us away to Germany because what we are Jewish, and there was a punishment. They want to destroy all the Jews in Europe. So that's what caused the Holocaust. And we just sit there and wait to the time when we're going to die. There was nothing else to do. There was no hope. But all of a sudden, looks like God was good to us, and they sent the American army and the British army and the Russian army, and they liberated us from the Germans. And then we started a new life. Now, if you want to know something, but specifically you want to know, in a nutshell, I told you the story. But if you want to know something specifically, question, ask me. Or any of you.
You want me to tell my story?
Yeah.
My story is a little longer than yours.
I speak faster than you.
No, you didn't put in the details.
Okay, there you are.
The way it went.
You explain yours the way you feel like explaining.
They took us from my small town, not so small town, but they took my parents and my sisters, two sisters and my grandmother, my aunt, the whole family.
Did you know they were coming? Did you know they were coming to take you away? Did they give you
No,
time to get ready?
no, they tricked us. First of all, we lived in our own homes, and then they told us that we have to go out of our own homes into a ghetto where they collected all the Jewish people, old, young, sick, feeble, everybody. And they put us all together into a place where they used to make brick. It had only a roof over it, no sides, no walls. The wind was blowing, the rain came in. It was only dust on the ground and nothing else. And they were chasing the people like they chase the carols. And as the people was running away from being beaten, the dust covered the people. I couldn't see my parents. Everybody was screaming. And by the time they got everybody into this enclosure and the dust settled, that's when we saw each other. And my mother passed out. There was no water to give her to revive her. And a young man came with a bottle of water, and he gave her some in her mouth, and she came to. We was there 2 days in this place. But I was completely content because I knew I was together with my family. And after the 2 days, they put us into a carol car. As many people as would fit in there, stooping down on the floor. No water, no air. They locked the doors on us. There was little children, babies, screaming for water. There was none. The mothers urinated into a dish, and that's what they gave for the child to drink. And that's how they took us to Auschwitz. 5 days. And when we got there, they opened up the doors, and my mother was holding my older sister's child, little 2-year-old little girl. And one of the men who was helping, a Jewish man in a striped clothes who was tending the concentration camp, told my sister, my older sister, to give the child to my mother into her arms because it's better that way. At the time we didn't know why, but she abided. She gave the child to my mother, and we came down from the cattle car, and they started to sort the people, the men into one section, the boys into another section, and younger girls. I was 19-year-olds at the time. My younger sister was 13, and my older sister was 23. And all strong young people, they put us into one group, and my mother with my Virgie's child into another group. And they started pulling us like the people into these groups. And that's when I saw my father the last time. And they took us one way and took the rest of them another way. And they took us to a place. It was a big, big building with a big door on it. We had to leave everything what we brought with us in the cattle car, like clothing and shoes and combs and soap and whatever. They told us we're going to work. And they said, we all going to work, and in the evening we all be together. And we were satisfied. We didn't know what to expect. We was just glad we were still alive, all of us. And they took us to this big building with a big door on it, and they told us to go in and take our clothes off and shoes off, all naked, and they had hooks on the wall. It was like a tiled wall, a tremendous big room. There was at least 500-600 women in that room at the time. And they told us to remember the number under the hook. That as you close, you're going to come back to that. And they told us we have to go take a shower because the 5 days in the cattle car, it was hot and we was dirty and we was sweaty and we were smelly. So we were glad to go into the next room. But I remember there was pipes as wide as a trash can, a metal trash can from floor to ceilings, and there were perforated holes on the pipe from the floor to ceiling down. And they told us to go under the shower because we're going to get water. And we did get water. And after they didn't give us enough, no soap and nothing, just a little bit of water. And from there we went out. They pushed us out. And then we had to go through another building with narrow passages, like just the one person could go through, but it was like a mouse maze, is that what they call? That if you went 2 yards, you didn't see what was happening in front of you. You just went by yourself. They allowed you to keep your shoes. So we carried the shoes with the hands up, all naked. We had to go in this maze and go one after the other. And at one corner we got to, they cut our hair off, completely bald. Then there another place under your arm and everywhere else where you had hair on yourself. By the time we got out of this building, we didn't recognize each other without hair. And we were screaming each other's name. Where are you? Where are Virgie? They hollered for me. Where I am? And they were standing next to me. I didn't recognize them. And from there they took us to a camp, wooden barracks, no bed. It had wooden floors in it, low windows all around it, no glass, just a hole for a window, and they locked us in there. No water, no toilets, no nothing. Heat, tremendous heat in the daytime, and very cold at night. No cover. They took our clothes away. They never took us back to the place where we had to remember the number. When they made us go out of the room where they shaved us, they threw us all kinds of rags to put on, that from the style we could tell it was at least 25 years old, if not more. And it didn't fit one person. We exchanged it with one another. There was a very rich woman from my town, very, very rich person, a tall, skinny woman. And they threw her a dress that above her, almost to her navel, the dress fit her and not below. And she took the dress and picked her up and she started dancing around like a ballerina. And her bottom was wide open with all the things that was. We couldn't help, but it was comical. You couldn't help. We looked at her and we started laughing. Then we exchanged amongst each other. This fit you? Strangers, we don't never know them. We exchanged who would fit what. Some women, her head was cold without the hair. And then if somebody's dress was so long, they tore off the hem and they tied it on this other person's head to cover her head. And nothing to eat, nothing to drink. We was in this barracks for about, when we got to this barracks, came a Polish girl. She had long hair already. That's what we could tell, that she must have been there a long time, because the Czechoslovakian girls, they took them a lot earlier than they took us. First they took all the Czechoslovak people and Romania and all those before they came to Hungary. And this girl told us, because my younger sister, Vera, she was very frail. She was 13 years old, a young teenager, that she said to us that let the young people step out and they go to the children's camp. And you older sisters, you're stronger, you can work. And when you come back from work, you're gonna meet in the evening. And I talked to both of my sisters, Vera and Bergie, and I said to her, I said, look, you're so frail, you don't have any strength. We'll work instead of you two. You go to the camp. Her and me gonna work for you too. And she stepped out, and we didn't see her again. They tricked us again. And I could never forgive myself that I told her to step out. And while we was in Auschwitz, in Birkenau, the only thing was in my life, I have to get her out of the camp, because I'll go home to my father and my mother, and I'm gonna tell them I brought them home. Because I told her to step out and I was responsible. For about 5 weeks we was there until I found out where she was. There was electric wires between camps that if you touched it, you wanted to die, you can touch it and you get electrocuted. We had nothing to eat. We picked the grass from the ground. But soon there was no grass to be eaten, only mud. And where she was, where Vera was, in this children's camp, she said she made friends with a young Czechoslovakian girl who had long hair already. And she told her that if you hear from my sisters, and she told her our name, that to let her know, because what the Germans made us do is carry blankets from one camp to another, what they took off of the trains that we brought with us. They took off all those things from pots and pans, but they told us we go to work, so we brought with us to live, blankets and pillows and whatever. And they piled these things up into one big building, and they always came into our camp and hollered, 200! And I was the first there always. I dragged Bridget, my sister, to come with me. But before we got to this, Bridget was sitting on the ground, crying for 3 days that the pacifier was left in her coat in the cattle car. How her baby gonna sleep at night with my mother? She don't have the pacifier. She just sat in one place on the ground, and I used to tell her, you sit here and I'll go find something to eat. I always went, I helped, I scrubbed the floor for a Czechoslovakian girl who was the head of the barrack. Every wooden building had a Czechoslovakian girl who was our, I don't know how, overseer, and I don't know how you say it in English. It's overseer. Was about 1,000 women in one barrack, like the soldiers' barrack, the American soldiers' barrack. And I went and I offered her all my help, what I can do. I scrubbed her floor. I polished her furniture, because these women was in touch already with a man, Jewish man, who was there for a longer time. So what they could salvage from the cattle cars, they would bring it to these women to make their life easier. But they were prisoners just the same like we was. So I offered her help, and she let me scrub her floor, and for that she allowed me to take the breadcrumbs, what they cut the bread for themselves, and the crumbs that fell off on the table, and she told me, you can take that. So I took it like this, and I just held it in the palm of my hand, and I ran to Bergie. Here, open your mouth, here, open your mouth. And I fed her like I feed a little baby, because she didn't want to live, and the pacifier was stayed in the cattle car. After 5 weeks or so, every time I went, wherever they hollered 200, I was the first in line. We had to go 5 in a row, and they always counted us 5, 10, 15, 20, until the 200 people was there. In the meantime, to the grapevine, that these Czechoslovakian girls, they were all Czechoslovakian, they were like one family. And Vera made friends with one of these young girls, and through the grapevine I found out where she was. But I didn't know when they're gonna take us to that camp. So every time they hollered 200, I was there, because that was my chance to get her. For 5 weeks I wasn't successful. The 5th week, but in the meantime I found an older lady who wanted to go there because her child was there and she was alone. I made it up with her that when they holler 200, you be here, because I want to come you to be in the 200. That I wanted to exchange better for her, because if the count don't come out, if they count over there and one is missing, then it's big trouble. So when they hollered 200 that time, I didn't know if I'd be successful or not. But I ran, as they hollered, right away I ran and grabbed the woman and Bergie both by hand. Let's go. And we ran, and we was in the group to go over. As we went over to the other camp, over the barbed wire opening, comes a young girl with blonde hair, and she says, Kovac, name Kovac. When I heard Kovac, I thought, yes, here we are. Is Vera here? Vera here? She says, yes, she's here. She's in this and this room. She says, I'll get her. I said to the old lady, I said, go with her. Exchange yourself, go. And this young girl was willing to take this older lady. She took her into the barrack, and Vera comes out, runs out with this girl, comes back to us, screaming, crying. Instead of being, she didn't know what to do. She was screaming, let them kill me here. I don't go back. I want to die right here. She was hysterical. And we just kept telling her, be quiet, don't draw attention to yourself. And finally she quieted down. She left her shoes in there. And what happened was the old lady didn't know where to find her child. She didn't know where to find her child, and this young girl went back to get Vera's shoes. And she saw the old lady wander around by herself. She didn't know where was her child. So this young girl took the mother to her child and brought us Vera's shoes. So I was thrilled, but I was scared to death. We started counting. We go back to our own camp. 5, 10, 20, up to 200, and instead of 200, it's 201. I thought to myself, my God, what happened? I brought the woman. I didn't mess up the count. And we had Vera between us, Bergie and me, and I just told her, cover your face with a blanket, hold up the blanket. Just cover, because they could tell who was so young. And in 5 weeks, they went down so fast. Vera was, you could see through her nose, she was so thin already. Her mouth was all swollen up like a, turned out, the top and the bottom. She had, I don't know what kind of illness that was. She was going down. She was going to die. And our luck was that we was toward the end of the group. The 2 Czechoslovakian women who the overseers started from the beginning, looking into everybody's face. You are from here. You are from here, and everybody denied it. And you are from here, and about the 6th or 7th row from where they started, there was a mother with a real young child who was about 10 years old but small built and run down. And then they said, you are from here, from one side, the other one from the other side. And the mother said, no, she's not from me, she came from the other camp. And they started beating both of them down to the ground, screaming, everybody. And then a woman said, don't hit them no more. I'm alone, I'll stay here. So they took this woman out and they let us go back to our camp. And that's how I stole Vera from another camp. That I can answer to my parents. And I brought them back. My whole life was that I see them again. They come home and we are going to meet. We are going to go home and we all be home together. A week after that came an order that they're going to take us out of. That was already, I don't know, I forgot, it's 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, I don't remember anymore. That they're going to select people to go out to a factory to work. And I don't know, there was a grapevine somehow that this factory is a good place to go. They're not going to kill you, because they always treat you for something. To get on a truck, and they take you to take a shower, and then the people never came back. And at night we could smell, I could see the flames from the crematorium, the gas chamber, the smell of bone and flesh in your nose. It just never went away. And when they tell you, you go on, this is a good place, you just don't believe it. But you think to yourself, here is sure that. That we know because people got scarlet fever, they had dysentery, they had all kinds of sickness, people died left and right, diabetics, no medication, any other problems what they couldn't see when they selected the people they needed a certain time in the extermination camp, that who was sick, they're gonna die there on their own. And who stayed alive and healthy and went through this period of time, they were the ones who worked for them. And thank God we stayed alive. Now, how are we gonna get out of there? The Vera is so frail, so skinny, so small. She don't look strong enough to go to work in any kind of factory to dig the ditches. We didn't know what we're gonna have to do. So Bergie and I, we talked it over, that when the day of the selection, everybody had to get undressed, always naked, only the shoes, and had to go. They took us through again in a maze, and we made it up that we let Vera go first, because we couldn't see what goes on beyond 2 yards in this maze. But we figured, if they don't throw Vera out, then we can go through too. So we made this up that we let Vera go first, and we kept running back to the end of the line to make sure to give her space to go through completely this maze. And we find her at the other end. And that's what happened. Vera's luck was that she had a little bit more bosom than any other child her age. And that's how they let her go through. Otherwise, they would have thrown her out, and that they would have killed her. And when I figured already that we was almost at the very end, she went through, and that's when I went through, and Bergie was front of me. I was always like a hen for them, like a mother hen, to make sure they're okay, because the last look of my mother. And she went away with the baby, holding the baby, Bergie's baby. She looked back between holding the child, and she looked back, and I caught her last glimpse. And I could read her face that she was glad to see the three of us standing together. And that gave me a feeling that I was responsible for them. I'm not the oldest. But I had to bring them home for them one look. And I tried my best to save them all. So finally when after we went through this maze, the selection, and we found Vera on the other side, we was ecstatic that we made that we're getting out of this camp, this extermination camp. And that's when they took us into a real shower. They gave us water and soap and a uniform, like a prisoner uniform. And they put us on a train. But in the meantime, what they gave us to eat was this mud and grass in trash cans, that when you put one spoonful in your mouth, you said, I take one spoon for my mother, because I want to stay alive. I take another spoon for my father, because I want to stay alive to see my father. And that's how we talked one another into to eat the mud and the grass, because whatever, it was only bad until it went down into your stomach. Then you didn't feel no more. The only thing you felt, the gravel between your teeth that was left over inside. But it was better than die of hunger. And they put us on a And they put us in a cattle car, and they took us for 2 days, no food, no water, to Allendorf, where the munition factory was. They took us to work there. When we got off the train, I didn't have the strength to walk anymore. I was so hungry, and we had no food to eat, and we had to walk maybe, I think, about 2 or 3 miles from the cattle car to the camp itself. And when we got into the camp, they gave us food to eat, potatoes, and some kind of sauce on top, a slice of bread, and a cup of milk. That was our first meal since we left our home. Real food. They let us recuperate for a week, like feeding us. But since our system wasn't accustomed to real food, everybody had diarrhea. They didn't have enough toilets that for all the 1,000 women who they took to this camp to work. Then they put something into our food that stopped the diarrhea and also all the menstrual period too. After a week, they took us into this underground munition factory that if you were standing next to it, you wouldn't recognize what it was, because it was all underground and grass on top and trees on top. It's like a tunnel led into it. There was every kind of machinery and mixers to mix the salt with some kind of poison and explosive. What we had to carry the empty hulls and the empty grenades and the empty big drum what they dropped into the ocean to blow up the ships. We had to carry salt in bags, 2 girls, 150 pound, 200 pound of salt bag. 2 girls had to carry it into a mixer like it was a 2-story place that you had to put the ingredients in on top, and it came out on the bottom and being filled into these empty grenades and these tank-like things. Right now it don't come to me the name. Yes, and water was not supposed to get in contact with it. And we worked there for a year. They gave us some kind of clothes, and they put a yellow stripe. They painted on, in fact, you had to put it on, and once you had it on, they took a big brush with bright yellow paint on it and pulled it down in the middle of your back to mark you. We had no hair. The German people, we had to walk from the camp to the factory every day. They gave us wooden shoes that put blisters on our feet, no socks. We used the bags from the salt to cover our feet, especially when winter came and snow. We had no clothing. You just covered your legs up, you wrapped the paper around and tore up some of your dress to tie it up that you have some kind of cover on your legs. And no food. After a while, they didn't give us no milk, didn't give us no potatoes, they didn't give us no bread, some kind of concoction what they made up out of sawdust, because we couldn't chew it up. We just had to swallow it as it was, but it was better than nothing. What I used to do, I always tried to outsmart the Germans. The Germans brought them food for the outsiders who had who lived in another building. And for them, they brought in potatoes and carrots. They were privileged people. Potatoes and carrots, and I don't know what else they had. So what they peeled off the potatoes, they threw that into the garbage. There was a garbage pile. And I noticed that. And I used to go when I saw that I could sneak to that garbage pile outside and put it into my skirt, the potato peel, what it was thrown out, and the carrots peel, what was thrown out, and put it in my dress and run back to the barracks and divide it for all of us, whoever was in that room, to have something in the mat to chew. And we stayed at this place for a year. And we know that the front must be coming closer because they didn't took us to work every day anymore. They didn't tattoo us anymore like the people previously before us. I have no tattoo marks. They didn't have no more time for that. And one day they said the whole camp has to get up and we're gonna walk. They chased us out of this camp and we walked on the road with the Germans beside us with the big dogs, that if you stepped out of line or you didn't have the strength to go anymore, they just let the dogs go and everybody had again strength to run till they rest breath. At night they let us lay down on the ground, on the wet ground, and that's where my younger sister Vera, the bone in her hip got a cold, and because she had no doctor's attention, it became soft, and I don't remember the exact name, but tuberculin, the bone became soft and porous. Tuberculosis, yes. And 3 days they chased us, and the third day they chased us into a small town, and we were scared to death because all of a sudden there was no more Germans who was watching us. We were all on our own. All the Germans disappeared with the dogs, and we were scared. We didn't know what's gonna be now. Who's gonna get a hold of us now and shoot us to death with a machine gun? And there was nobody, and we were just hiding between buildings, cold. And in this small town, there was a man, a German man, that who told us that going to the schoolhouse, he must have known that this is the end. And he must have known that we were prisoners of war or something. And he told us there was no more school. Everybody was hiding in their own houses. And he told us, going to the schoolhouse, there's nobody there. It was very cold. And we went in there, scared, huddling on the floor in the corners. 14 of us, or 20 of us, I don't know. Because the group, when the Germans disappeared, one went this way, the other group went that way. Everybody wanted to hide, not to be caught by who knows who. And we went into this room, and we stayed there overnight, and the following morning, I got up from the floor, I looked out the window, and I saw this tank coming down on the hill, an army tank with a white star on it. And I didn't know who it was. I was just scared to death that what's going to happen to us now. And God bless them, it was the Americans. And as they rode through the town, Somebody must tell them that he was some prisoners. And a Jewish sergeant came in. And he told us not to be afraid anymore. He spoke German. We had two girls who was born in Germany. They spoke perfect German. And he told them, don't be afraid no more, it's all over. You are free, and you are free, and we just couldn't grasp it that we were free. And he went out, and he went to the Bürgermeister, they called him, the head of the town, like the mayor of the town. And he told them, as many people is in this room, that many bed with mattresses this minute. You should have seen the caravan, how they came with the hand wagons and brought the mattresses and the beds, and they pushed them side by side for the 14 or 20 of us and barely fit into the big schoolroom. But before we was liberated, the school teacher who lived in a big house told us before we got into the schoolhouse, the teacher lived in his own house in a big house. He told us to, heraus, away from here. Away, we don't want you here, away from here. And he was going when this other man said we should go into the schoolhouse, it's nobody there. And we told this to this Jewish sergeant. And he went to the door of the teacher's house. And he took his long gun, what he had, and with the end of the wooden part of his gun, he went to that door. And he beat on that door 3 times. And the old man, he was an old man with glasses. I never forget because I watched him from the schoolroom. This sergeant got a hold of his front lapel. And he picked him up. And he shook him back and forth. That's what I could see this going. Back and forth from the door. In and out, in and out, in and out. And then he didn't come out no more because the sergeant threw him back into his house. And we were free. The soldiers, they brought us toothpaste and toothbrush and chocolate and canned goods. They opened it up. They didn't know what to give us, all us the way we looked like. Halfway grown out hair, ragged. Wooden shoes, no shoes, paper on the feet walking.
What was the name of that town?
No. Homberg? Not Homberg. I got a picture of it.
What's the difference? I forgot the name.
It's a very small town, but I have a picture of it with a baby carriage on it. I'll show you, it's in the picture book. And that's when this sergeant, everybody, each German house, they gave 3 to 4 girls to feed us. And they fed us. They gave us to eat. They gave us some to take home. And they threw out the teacher, the sergeant threw out the teacher out of his own house and put us into his house. We got out of the schoolroom. There were separate rooms. There was a bathroom with a toilet for the first time. We took down their draperies and sewed dresses for ourselves. They left the draperies there. Dresses by hand for us. Shoes, the mayor, the whole town was opened up, the Americans opened up every store. They took the shoes from the stores and pulled them out of the racks and threw them into the middle of the room and told us, take everything you need, take every store, clothes, shoes, what you can think of, food. And we did. The thing was, I couldn't walk by myself on the street. I was afraid to walk by myself, how it was drilled in me, 5 in a row. I was always looking back if anybody comes after me, I'm walking alone. And that's how we was liberated.
I couldn't tell that kind of story because I was in the army for 4 years. And then all of a sudden we decided that we gotta go and work for the Germans. We had to make, he was building airports, and he was forced labor. He was making everything, he was a shovel brigade. And then all of a sudden the American flyers came and there was airplanes all over, and then they put us on a train, the same cattle train, and they shoved us to Germany, to the biggest concentration camp called Bergen-Belsen. But nobody had to work over there.
That's where Ian Frank died.
Nobody had to work over there. Everybody was waiting to die. He was throwing the people in the ovens, the crematories, and he also made like fire camps, wood people, and they burned them. And there was a tremendous big territory. And that's how you could hear the scream and the smell from the bones. People was burning. And we went down. I was going. They put us in a camp. There was a bunch of children, women and children, and the Germans made bargain with Switzerland to exchange for medicine or whatever they wanted to do. They exchanged prisoners. So finally, I was already very sick, very run down, and they put us on. We walked to a train, and they put us in the train, and they took us to Switzerland, but we never arrived there. And they also said to each other, because that whole thing was a battalion, but we was together for 4 years, plus the children. And they said to anybody who dies, just throw them out of the door, because the door was open, because we was running in Germany, deep Germany. So the train was running day and night, was running, till all of a sudden the train stopped. The Russians and the Americans came together what they call the Elbe River. And there what I remembered is I was very sick, and the Red Cross picked me up from the
train.
So they put me in a hospital, and that was the liberation.
How did you both meet?
Now,
That's another story.
How'd you get back home?
You know how we met?
I was in the camp that they liberated me in the train. There was a hospital. So there was also a big camp for the Germans, and there was thousands of people like we. The Germans were such a bastards, such a sadist, that they let everybody go out because everybody was hungry. Eat all you want. And it was full of glass, poison. People was dying by the thousands. Just the last minute, the war was over for all practical purposes. The war was over. But he didn't want anybody to survive. So I was in the hospital and I started to recuperate a little bit. And we had a clubhouse where we get together. And that's all we did is looking. He was putting together literatures. Who survived in this camp, who survived in this camp.
Lists of survivors.
The Red Cross circulated
Because they
papers.
didn't know what happened to brothers and sisters and parents.
And,
They still didn't know where they were.
I saw my mother's name on one of these
Yes.
lists. So I find out there it is. I speak German fluently that time, and I just then I passed by a German house. There was a bicycle outside, and I jumped on it, and I started to. I wasn't strong. I was sick, but I was going to the next train. Now everything was bombed down. Every bridge was down, so they had trains from one bridge to the other. And it took me, I don't know how many days, I get to a town. The name was existing. She's from the same town like I was, and the same name that I was, but I was a different person.
That's so strange. She was with me in the same camp with 1,000 women from the same city. I knew her, the lady. She was the wife of a lawyer. Same name as that is the mom.
But anyway,
Rice. With the
anyway,
second
I
man.
didn't have no more energy to go nowhere. I stayed there. And all of a sudden, I find out that 1,000 women around, spread around there. Every town, a little bit of people. But I got stronger and stronger all the time, and I was demanding. I got a uniform, American uniform on, which I couldn't wear, but I had to dye it blue. But I had a Jewish star, and I could accomplish anything I want. I went into the
Germans
mayor,
were afraid of us.
and I demanded things because he was eating in restaurants and houses, and I was demanding that they should give him kitchens with food, with everything, and clothing and everything, and I was a terror all by myself.
But the people
mayor,
were afraid to ask for it.
pardon?
The Jewish people were afraid to ask.
Girls, women.
Yeah.
We went to their houses.
So
and
I
they
grabbed a couple of soldiers, and I went to the mayor. I speak German. They didn't. The soldiers didn't speak American. And I said to him, I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And then he says, I cannot do that. How do I go and account for the money? I said, put it in my Hitler's account. I am not interested in that. And that's the way I was bringing him up. And finally, about 6 months passed by, and the American government decided that anybody who wants to go back where he belongs, to Czechoslovakia, or Hungarian, or Romanian, we deliver them. Or anybody wants to have relatives or figures to go to America or to England or to Australia or wherever, then they supported us. They put us in houses or in camps. So she decided that she wants to go home, and she was believing that she didn't believe that everybody was killed. She had to prove herself that some. So I said to her, all right, I'll take you home. So we went home with a big train, but a freedom train already. Although there was a cattle train, but only 20 to a cattle train, they were laying down. And and she didn't find nobody, so we came back to Germany together. And
But in the meantime, Vera became a cripple.
Yeah, well.
When she laid on the ground, when they chased us on the road, a German woman, what they did was they had a big stick, and they hit you like they hit a cattle to get moving, and the mess starts moving. And they hit Vera on the hip, and that hip became so bad for her, she wasn't able to walk. She was completely immobilized, and Daddy used to carry her. And what?
I wanted to finish because the tape is going to go down soon.
Yeah, the other side.
It's all right.
No, that's already the other side.
Go ahead, it's all right.
Stop, wait. Please stop it.
I strictly speaking to the children now. That I want you to realize that right now you are small children. Later on when you play the tape, I want you to remember.
It's very hard to talk about it.
Your grandfather doesn't want to cry, but he's crying. This is not an easy memory to pass on to the next generation.
Always remember that you are Jewish, and always stand up for that and be proud of it. And don't let nobody put you down for that, for your religion. Always remember it, and always be on guard, because never know, it can happen again if you're not on guard. Always.
You have to support Israel, because it's the only place you can escape. This is America, it's your land, but you are Jewish. You have a lot of anti-Semitic people. I don't know if you know what anti-Semitic people is. You are a minority in this country. This is your country, but still the minority people.
Like the rabbi said at your graduation, you're an endangered species.
That's right.
But anyway, I'm glad you said this, what we have to say, and I hope you learn something from it and think about that we was people too. Only one thing we was wrong, that we was Jewish. We was born Jewish, and we killed our family, and we survived, and we tried to rebuild our heritage. And God help you all with this. I hope mankind never know this, what we went through.
When they took you from your house, what were you doing? Where were you?
I was working
Wait a
in a
minute.
silk factory.
Jody wanted to know what you were doing when you were taken from your
That's
house.
what you tried to say.
Yes, we were all working, my mother and father, all the children. I was working in a silk factory, making the design of the fabric, like scarves, all kind of motifs in the scarves. I designed that and weaved that into a machine that afterwards it was woven into fabric. And we was always working people, my whole family. Yeah.
How many people survived and how many people didn't survive?
6 million people died. I am not sure how many survived. I don't
3
know.
million.
How many?
We don't have 3 million Jews.
I don't know how many
9
survived.
million already. Did you get a chance to go to school or Hebrew school before they took you away to Germany?
I went to a Hebrew school that was actually an elementary school. And it was supported by the Jewish people because the government didn't support Jewish schools. And that's where I learned Hebrew. But it wasn't enough.
In Europe, every faith, every religion had their own school, from public school to high school. There's no school like in the United States, public school. Only parochial schools. Each faith had their own schools. Jewish people went to the school, to the parochial school, and learned Hungarian and arithmetic and geography, and also Jewish, Hebrew.
What year was did it happen? And what year were you liberated?
That happened started in 1940, and we was liberated in 1945. 5 years.
That's it.